You have to believe in the romance of it because it's a business where you're thinking so far in advance.
Right.
I'm just at the beginning and I'm already planning for the next generation.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ria Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Hooray! Talking about the romance of it all in terms of being a cider maker, and in this case also a distiller, was Matilda Temperly of Somerset Cider and Brandy Company. That is based in the UK, and Matilda and her father, Julian Temperly, are our featured guests this week on episode 474. And I could tell you right out there in Ciderville right now that you are in for a treat, because this is a very intimate conversation with a family-run cidery that has really set the stage not only for the UK but worldwide on two different levels. You see, back in the 1960s, Julian Temperly bought the farm, which is at the base of a place called Burrow Hill. And you may have seen photos, probably many, many photos, because it's an Instagram-ready site to take a photo where you have this giant mound called Burrow Hill, and on the top is a singular tree. And it's so picturesque. You just want to be able to run up to it because you see it from the bottom, and then on the top you're able to have this 360 view. It just screams, you have arrived. And then across the street is this old farm that has been producing cider for hundreds of years. The actual mill, they have this tasting room that is all beams, like that kind of wood structure beam. And on one side are these giant oak casks where they could pour out the different ciders. And then in the middle of the room, there's all the different bottles for purchase and merch that you could get. And then as you enter from one side of the building, you're walking past this elevator, right? An elevator for apples. So it's like a little ladder going up that rotates and brings the apples out of this little wash basin. So imagine an upside down pyramid, but with no tip. That's what the wooden structure looks like where the apples are. They get dropped in there, rinsed, and then they're brought up to the milling section where the apples get grounded. And this is all right there. And the terroir in that room, it's just incredible. In 1989, Somerset Cider and Brandy Company became the first licensed distiller of apple brandy in the UK. And they were awarded the Protected Geographical Indication, or what is known as PGI status. And that is like an appellation that you would see in France for wine and Calvados and cider. So it's a real big, big marker for the family and also in the world of distilling. Currently, they have a 20-year-old brandy, and we were able to taste that. You're going to hear us talking about it during this recording. And for me, as a podcaster and somebody who's been in the cider world for 30 plus years, it was one of those moments of pinch me happening. I can't even tell you, to be sitting there with Julian and Matilda going through a whole bunch of their different product and then tasting that 20-year-old apple brandy. Whew. And yeah, I'll just get straight to the point. It was freaking fantastic. One thing is for certain, when you have a product like apple brandy made by the cider maker themselves, and that is one of their value-added products on top of, their exquisite ciders, their Perry, which they also have at Burrow Hill, and I want to say that blew my mind. That is for now. That's for drinking now, and might be able to hang out if you're lucky and the apples are right, the tannin has the structure to hold it, and the cider techniques are spot on. You could have something that's like 20 plus years old. But when you have apple brandy, that is generational wealth. You are putting down the stake, not for just now, but for the long run. And that's exactly what they have. Absolute wow factor. So you are in for a treat, Ciderville. hang on to your glasses, get them ready. We're going to be going to that featured conversation very shortly. But first, I have some really fun and exciting news from out and about in Ciderville. Coming up in April, on the 18th to be exact, in the country of Hungary, there's going to be a cider salon, and this is going to be a little bit of Hungarian and mid-European ciders. So if that's something that you can make it to, I know you're going to have a blast, because you know who's spearheading this? Antje Gergely of Albaget Garden Projects. And of course, you may have heard of Antje through this here podcast, because she has been on not one, but two cider tours. Most recently, she was on the episode featuring James Forbes of Little Pomona. So that was only 2 episodes ago. So that would be number 472. And she was also on the French cider tour, where I was able to record with her while it was raining outside in the bus. We had a sit down, tasted some of her amazing ciders from Hungary, and I will have a link in the show notes for that episode. So you could just go to ciderchat.com, go in the search bar, and put in her first name, which is Antje. That's spelled Ancha. That'll give you some links to her side, or just make sure to follow her on Instagram. It's Albaget Garden Projects. So that is the town, Albaget, Abaliget, Ablaget. It's kind of a fun word to say. She's spearheading a cider salon. So how cool is that? Once again, it's going to be April 18th in 2026. This next little news item is also taking place in April of 2026, and it has to do with a Totally Cider tour. Yeah, we're returning to the UK for Blossom Time. I am kind of like, my body's buzzing just being able to tell you this, because I just came back from the UK in August with an amazing group of folks, a fantastic tour. And I knew that there was a demand for this, because it's happening. This is the time to do it. I mean, life is short. If anything, listening to this episode is going to show you, like, don't put off to tomorrow what you could do today. And I want to get back to the UK and experience it during Blossom Time with a whole bunch of folks. So what's going to be happening? Here are the dates. It's going to be taking place April 27th through May 3rd. And yes, we will be going to Somerset Cider and Brandy Company. Can't wait. I just can't wait. And once you hear this interview with both Matilda and Julian, you'll know why you want to go on this tour, because it's going to be that fantastic just to experience their product and to see it. It'll put you in touch with cider at a whole other level. Being on site, smelling the air, the earth, especially in that springtime and that bloom time, and then tasting the product where it was made, that is just a whole other level. Just a whole other level. So yeah, Somerset Cider Brandy Company is going to be part of that. We're also going to be going to The Newt, which is in Somerset. I have an episode with Charlie Inns and Luke Benson of The Newt. This is undoubtedly the most bougiest estate in the UK that is open to the public. They are instrumental for putting on the Chelsea Flower Show in London. The Newt is a big deal, a real big deal on a lot of levels. And the fact that they are all about apples is just a tremendous win for the cider world. Not just Somerset, but the cider world. So yeah, we're going to be going to the Newt. We'll be having a tour and a tasting, and we'll be enjoying lunch on site. And if you want to experience the Willy Wonka of cideries in the world, you got to go to the Newt. If you haven't gotten your name into Cider Chat yet to be put on the early release reservation list, I highly recommend you do that now. This tour will be released this November for reservations. And if the last tour is any indicator of the popularity of these Totally Cider tours, I suspect it will be sold out just as quickly, which is what happened for the August tour. So that's what's happening in April. And when I come back, I have something to put in your calendar for September. Meet me in Paris in September for a French cider tour to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. This is going to be the week of September 20th. So we know that there's going to be fruit on the trees at that point. We'll be visiting the Musée de Poix. We'll be going to Mont Saint-Michel, having dinner overlooking the Mont as the sun sets. After visiting the Mont that afternoon, that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Bring a bottle of cider to enjoy on the grounds of the Mont. And then the following night, as the sun is setting, we'll be having a cider dinner with Johanna Sicillon and her husband Louis Sicillon in St. Malo. That is going to be a first for me. I had Johanna and Louis on the podcast back in season 9. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. She is a biodynamic orchardist and comes from a long legacy of winemakers in the family of Sicillon. They're very well known in France. And what she is doing with her cider and pie is absolutely exquisite. So, Wednesday evening, we have dinner at the Mont. Thursday evening, we have a cider dinner with Johanna and Louis. And then Friday, dinner with Eric Bordelais. Yeah, this is our signature for the French cider tour. We've been able to work with Eric all these years, and it is one for the history books each time. He continually blows my mind. If you want to experience what it's like to have dinner with, at one time he was Paris's top sommelier and then became a cider maker. And just have a gastronomic experience that will blow your mind. You want to get on the cider tour. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in 2026. The UK cider tour will get released this November for reservations, and in January will be the French cider tour. So again, send an email to info@ciderchat.com. Put in the top heading Cider Tours. Be ideal if you let us know which tour you're interested in. It could be both. That's fine. And how many are in your party so we could get you on that early release for reservations. I hope to see you there. Walking through the orchards. Up next is our featured presentation with Julian Temperly and his daughter Matilda Temperly of Somerset Cider and Brandy Company. We're going to be talking about the orchards, the product itself. We're going to be going through some tastings and really having a very intimate conversation, which took place where they now store all the barrels of brandy. It's a massive room, and it was so unbelievable to be sitting there. Do check out some of the photos in the show notes for this here episode at ciderchat.com. Go to episode 474. I'll also be posting an Instagram reel, so you can follow Cider Chat. It is at Cider Chat, Ciderville on Instagram. And you will see just a sneak peek of the barrel room. We were sitting on one side of the barrel room and next to a table with all these different bottles of their eau de vie. They have their different years of their brandy, that 20-year-old brandy. And they also have, in that style of the French makers, which is called Pommeau, that's a blend of apple brandy and apple juice. And so they have quite a few of add-on products that you don't often see, really you don't see at all in the UK, because distilling is just starting to become more popular, to become skilled at the level that one needs to be to craft a really good brandy out of apples. You have to have the cider to begin with, and then know how to work the kitchen, which is the distillery. So we're going to be talking about the stills themselves and really getting into it. So we're sitting on one side of the barrel room next to a table with the product, and then up on the wall were these like 6 foot or maybe 7 foot portraits, one of Julian and his different family members, and I will have photos of that too. So I just felt like I was sitting in history with two of the most sweetest people. I really became quite fond of them both. It didn't take much to do that. And I hope that you get a sense of that too. It was really super special for me. And it gives me much pleasure to share this today with you. So without further ado, let us all grab a glass and join this chat with Julian and Matilda Temperly of Somerset Cider and Brandy Company at the base of Burrow Hill.
I arrived here in the late 60s. I had a great aunt that lived in the village, and when she died, the family moved to Somerset. My father was brought up in the village, and it was always intended, he always intended, to die in the family home, which is the other end of the village. So I came here then. I'd been travelling the world, and fate had it that we ended up by buying the farm here, which in those days used to make about 10 barrels of cider a year. It was a hugely prized cider. It was one of the best ciders around, but it was very much local cider and limited. But as time has gone on, the cider activities that I started then have gone on to take over everything that we do. So now we make barrels of cider brandy, we still make barrels of cider, but we live in an area which is widely considered to have some of the best cider apples in the UK, and that is what we use. We blend those to making cider. I think when I started we had 4 acres. We now have 200 of cider apples, and we blend those apples together to make the sort of cider we're looking for. And in my mind, that is what we need to do. We need to use local apples. The apples should have a Somerset heritage, and by sticking to those rules, we now make a considerable amount in this bonded warehouse, and there's another one next door. We have 350 barrels of cider brandy, which means that we've pressed again a lot of apples, made cider, distilled cider. We've got barrels from all over the world. Most of our barrels used to be sherry barrels, imported sherry in, or aged sherry in Spain. Now we have barrels of different sorts. We have some oak, which is grown in Somerset, which we've turned into barrels. Of that we're very enthusiastic about. We planted oak trees, and those will come back in 130 years' time, which I don't suppose any of us will have their hands on cutting them down. The chances are they'll end up with a preservation order on them, so nobody will be allowed to cut them down. But in the meantime, we will carry on buying oak and making barrels. We'll be playing with barrels for a long, long time to come.
Matilda, you came on board, what year was that? I'm sure you're always actively picking up apples and being part of the family, of course, an integral part.
I did seasons of work during whilst I was studying and while I was working elsewhere. And then full time, I guess I came around 10 years ago. So around 2015, I came back and I was trying to do a bit of this with my other job. We had a distiller and he was ill, so I came in to pick up the pieces of his paperwork and hand it on to the next distiller. I never really left after that. So at one point I realised I couldn't carry on 2 things, and it's a great privilege to work here. So I became here full time. And I guess in 2018 I took over as MD then.
7 years ago, yeah. I'm curious, what was your forward thinking there with your kids on that legacy to have somebody to kind of come up behind you, and maybe what was your experience with your parents in that way?
the idea of being bossed around by a daughter is not something you willingly end up in, but it has worked out that way.
Everybody's smiling right now.
But it is now a place that Matilda has a very large hand in the makings of it. And what we see here is cider brandy, but we've been looking at cider. And in many ways that has benefited from her intention as well. So we are proud cider makers. What we have to do is to make certain that we have a succession, and that applies to all farms.
It's true.
But England, we sell our cider in all sorts of places, and I think we can be quite proud of our cider. We have some of the best apples in this parish making cider, and that's generally recognised. But anyway, the fact she has a son and a daughter is an important. If she leaves a legacy which is worth them picking up, it would be jolly good, but that's her judgment.
To answer your question about did I ever feel any pressure to come into it, I didn't. I felt, I suppose, a familial duty, as every good child should, and there was never any expectation that we would come and work here. I think Julian was insistent that we all learnt science and studied science in one form or another, or something sensible in his mind, and having gone and studied sciences, I was probably here at the right time, in the right place at the right time.
When you were younger, how did you view cider? Was it something that you and your friends would be drinking?
We used to steal it wherever we could, but I think as a child you swipe any alcohol you can, and down here that's usually cider. But how did I view it? I think I've always had a romantic view of it, because how could I not, with Julian promoting it in his romantic way. But it's taken till I was much older to have a real understanding of it.
I imagine also with that, it's kind of like having a parent as a rock star. I mean, now Julian's, got a chuckle out of that, but in truth, that's kind of like what the cider world would be looking at. Those in the know would say, oh my goodness, that's your father, you're connected to...
It's a hard act to follow for sure.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of legacy preserving that's gone on, but we're doing well. Since I started here, we've built this warehouse where we are, and this represents 4,000 tonnes of apples. So we've been busy, but I might be managing director up here, but Julian is going to still be involved, even
the head honcho.
Yeah. He won't. You can't stop him, no matter what.
Once a rock star, always a rock star. Well, I mean that's great.
We did actually sell a barrel there to a rock star.
Oh.
Is a fellow that makes a bit of wine and a bit of cheese. And so he bought a barrel of cider brandy after much tasting. And I suspect in due course he'll claim to have made it. But I don't mind if he bought the barrel, he can claim all sorts of things.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, he's a true rock star. A very charming guy.
Well, it takes a rock star to know a rock star. I mean, that's how it goes. To be able to move it 6 degrees of separation. I'm feeling like a rock star right now.
In the legacy here, we are capturing my siblings. I have 3 siblings, and in one way or another, they will be working with us at some point in some way. And it's very, very much a family business. And I don't know who I'm going to capture properly first, but we will do.
Okay.
And then there's 9 in the next generation. And then on the farm, we're multi-generational families. We've got another family that's 3 generations in. We've got another mother-daughter team that look after the spirit in here. So it's much bigger than our family, and that's really important.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, bravo for that, because a family that plays together stays together. So on that, are there any tips for working with your family to keep it copacetic? Anything that has worked well for you, or things that you should avoid?
Ooh. Well, I know to avoid Julian first thing in the morning. That's one of our tips, and he should probably avoid me first thing in the morning. I think working with family, really, you feel mostly very lucky to work with your family. But obviously working with family, emotions are less guarded. So it's either utterly brilliant, which is 90% of the time, or you want to murder them. And that's fleeting, but it's
there.
It's there sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
But I think we get on the most part very well.
Well said, well said.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about cider. For listeners out there in the world who don't really know about your particular style of cider making, let's talk about yeast. Is it cultured yeast, or are you using the ambient native yeast in your ciders?
We do use cultured yeast. Sometimes, but not entirely, and whether the cultured yeast is the dominant yeast. If you've got a vat of cider maybe that had taken 20 or 30 tons to make it of apples, it's quite nice to use the best things you could do. Like if you're growing meat, you would put sheep in a field rather than rely on rabbits.
That's a good analogy, I like
in
that.
In our case, it doesn't really matter whether the yeast, the cultured yeast we put in becomes the dominant yeast. But there's a lot of other things, like consuming the sugar in juice. If we don't have any yeast at all, we'll yeast. So what we want is our cider to be ferment on a vigorous way, leaving a dry cider to be turned into normal cider for drinking or fermenting. What we don't want to leave, just any old yeast that might come in through the door. It's quite expensive having yeast, but it doesn't really matter if we didn't do it. You would come to a barrel in due course, which actually is slightly a contradiction of what I've just going to say. And the contradiction is that you might well get a stray yeast that comes along, and because there's no yeast there or no vigorous yeast there, finds itself a home and might produce some knockout cider. And by too vigorous addition of yeast, we might lose that advantage. But on the whole, as an insurance for things going the right way, it's certainly quite a good idea.
Go for the culture, yeah. When you're dealing with that many apples to make a cider, the wild yeast are kicking off initially, so that might give a little bit of overture to your style for your brand.
When people are researching in the past, they normally find that the yeast has come from equipment being used for cider in the beams, and that's where the yeast will inoculate. If you allow it, you don't get apples on the orchard after they've been washed. The inoculation of yeast will come from all sorts of dodgy places, and if you end up with a dodgy yeast, you've only got yourself to blame.
Yeah.
But we've got a barn where we make cider, which has been making cider for at least 200 years.
Incredible.
And dried yeast will be in the beams, and that will inoculate things, whether we like it or not.
Right.
So we are a very natural process, and in a way having access to natural yeast in some way is part of a natural process as well.
Yeah. I want to just describe a little bit of the cidery, which is where the actual shop is that people come into. You have a lot of people come in from all over the world. Today there was a tour group. There was people from Long Island, Brazil, Germany. It was like
Utah. There was something.
Utah, somebody from Utah, all over the globe. And so you're having that kind of culture there too, not just people culture, but there's a lot in your cidery, and you're using this elevator for the apples, this wood. We'll have photos of that. It's just incredible. So I can't help but to think that there is a particular, not just a terroir of the orchards we were in, but the terroir of the ciders that we're tasting. And I experienced that a little bit today with you, Matilda. That makes your signature cider. So let's talk about that, your signature. You have a couple classic flagship ciders. What are those that people would see out there and would be readily available?
Well, most popular cider would be a bottled cider. It's our classic Burrow Hill, fully tannic, Somerset style. It's made of up to 40 different varieties of apples, and it has got a big, juicy mouthfeel with a really strong tannic backbone. And that would be a classic Burrow Hill cider. That sells best for us because it sells in more places, but we still sell from our farm lots of still dry cider, still medium cider, straight from our barrels. But the ones in bottles travel further, so that would sell really well in London and around. And then we have our bottle fermented cider range that sells really well in the high-end restaurants. So we do bottle fermented Perry, we do bottle fermented Kingston Black cider and bottle fermented Stoke Red cider. And the smarter restaurants would have a tendency towards those. As the years are a bit more unusual, we are working with what we've got, so we're going to do more interesting table ciders that might be still. We've just done a Kingston Black still cider that is 7.6% from 2022, and we thought it was a really hot, unusual year, and that cider tasted so good on its own we didn't want to blend it. So we're still a small company, so we can do that. We can bottle alone things that really stand out.
But that is rare to have a single varietal cider.
Kingston Black is a great apple for it because it has everything. And you've seen the orchards today. We have about 45 acres of Kingston Black, and it has that beautiful sharpness and all the tannins and amazing florals. So it's a really unusual apple that we're heavily invested in. And the Stoke Red bottle fermented is also single variety, a very different feel to a Stoke Red, but it's the same. It has everything you need to make a good cider.
We tasted both of those earlier today, and that still was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I imagine this year, we're here in 2025, it's in August that we're sitting here. This is a very dry year. You're not putting your vintage on your bottles, so folks wouldn't necessarily know, but I'm going to make a recommendation that people do watch for this year, because I think you're going to have quite a lot of apples to work with, but really deep sugars in those apples too, if everything goes well between now and harvest. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
It should go well. I remember 76 when we had an extraordinary drought.
Yeah.
And the apples were brilliant. And the trees survived. Where it didn't rain from the beginning of April to the 12th of September. And we were all worried about the apples, but they didn't seem to mind. And if we're looking at a year like that, we'll be all right.
So this is a vintage year, I think, 2025.
This will be a vintage year.
Yeah, pay attention to this year, mark it on your calendar, which brings me back to the question of rotation or conditioning. How long does the cider condition before it's turned out into the public market? What is your standard there, or is there a standard?
It needs to age for at least a year.
At least a year. Okay.
We don't really do any ciders which are much older than the Cider Brandy world, which we here, we have a 20 years old. But if you had a 20-year-old cider, it's a matter of chemistry really. It hasn't actually got enough alcohol to self-pickle itself.
Yeah.
If you've got a vintage wine, it can't be a low alcohol wine. It's got to have a high alcohol. And effectively it pickles itself, and you can then come back to it 5 or 6 years later.
Our bottle fermented, we tend to lay down for quite a long time. Ideally, we'd be 3 years, but often it's much longer than that. So actually, our Perry is 2019. Our Stoke Red bottle fermented is on 2013 to 2014, and then our Kings and Black is 2015 at the moment. So those are looking more like 10-year cycles.
So yeah, let's put a pin on that. And for people listening right now, you're hearing the age of these ciders, right? 2019 for the Perry, was that?
The Perry, the bottle fermented that we tried
today,
earlier,
yeah, which was delicious. And we went and saw the pear trees today. They look like they'll be ready for picking quite soon here, earlier than normal. But the fact that you're able to hold on to it, and you're talking about a 2014, is that what you said?
Yeah.
And we're here in 2025, that's kind of around the gray area, right? That things really should probably be consumed. That's something to be noticing for listeners, is that that's good to know that cider can age, and it ages quite well. And that's the difference between a modern industrial cidery versus this orchard estate cidery, right? That's what you're really geared towards. We went through a number of orchards today. Is there particular orchards that you pick from that you are pulling those apples for the distillation versus the cider? How do you work that out, and how do you earmark that?
We know which orchards that we will use for cider brandy primarily. So the big orchard, the 55 acres, is primarily for cider brandy.
Okay.
But
Where the sheep were.
Yeah, where the sheep were. But it will depend on the harvest and what sharp apples you've got, to what you put where, what condition everything's looking in. So you've just got to put your best foot forward for the harvest that you're given, and it's different every year. But we have a sequence we move through the orchards that is more or less the same. We go back to pick each orchard 3 times.
Let's talk about that orchard again, because I want to make sure that we get a little bit of that story there, the history of that orchard. It's not just 50 plus acres, it's actually 75 acres. Could you tell us a little bit of the history?
We bought it in the 70s. It was planted actually in the 50s by the Shirings family. They had a policy of stashing a lot of their baby sham profits in agricultural land, but much of it became orchards. I mean, it's quite a sort of legitimate operation if you want to get rid of too much profits, is to invest it in land. And everybody did that.
Can I just correct you on the dates there? Sorry. They planted it in 1973 and 1974 and replanted it, and we bought it in 91.
Okay.
And it's the largest standard tree orchard in the UK, is that correct?
Known universe.
Oh, really?
And that's according to John Worrell, who is a Hereford cider expert.
Okay.
If it was the biggest orchard in England, and then it's also the biggest cider orchard anywhere, because cider orchards are not that common. But
specifically a traditional.
But as John Worrell stated, it was something that in the cider world, I'm not a person who would want to contradict John Worrell.
Okay, well, and neither will I. I'll follow your lead, Julian. It sounds like a good path to take. Oh my goodness. So let's talk a little bit more about the brandy. And that came on a little bit later, what the date was like 1989. Let's talk about that, because it's a big deal, getting the brand name Somerset and using a region like that. What was that like, and why did you pursue that?
Well, in the past, people always used to say, why don't you distill? Why don't you make carbon dust? And the answer to that is we didn't want to go to prison. And the regulations were so embracing that it was impossible.
Yeah.
But then in Hereford, the grand old man of English cider called Bertram Bulmer had a museum in Hereford for cider, still has one. And his museum applied for permission for an educational still, so he could explain distilling to sort of school children and the rest. And that basically broke the bar on stills. Us going into the common market meant our customers had to start thinking about being a bit more sensible. And the customs said very early on, don't you dare use the precedent of Bertram Bulmer's museum distillery, an educational distillery, not a working distillery, but as an education, as a precedent. And English law is a lot of precedent. So anyway, we didn't use it, but it was there as an unspoken thing, like a great monstrous justification for what we were up to. And Bertram was a great cider romantic. And by the time that we were dealing with him, he was 85 years old. And he was very cross and bad-tempered about a number of things. But he was also one of the richest people in the country at the time. So we owe a great debt to him. I was explaining to somebody the other day that he was John the Baptist, to which the lady I was explaining it to said, does that mean you're saying you're Jesus Christ? Of course, I wasn't doing such a shocking thing, but I say we owed a great debt to Bertram, but we won't use the possibility of being misunderstood to what we're claiming. But he created a modern cider industry, and in the end we owe a debt for creating the cider distilling industry by applying for a museum to still in Hereford. And that still exists, and the Hereford Cider Museum still exists.
It's a good showcase for cider, for sure, a destination. I know that there's a little Herefordshire versus Somerset or Gloucestershire or Wales, or maybe different parts of Somerset too.
Well, we have in Somerset what's called vintage areas for growing apples. They were defined in the 20s by the Long Ashton Research Station outside Bristol, which was the centre for many, many years of all sort of cider science. And it means we have vintage areas. We have one round here in Kingsbury. There's one where Roger Wilkins lives in Wetmore, and the other around in Boltonsborough. But as a cider maker, I know that it's not a particularly clever thing to go buy apples or use apples in the next door village. There's something, they don't have our particular soil, and the apples are best avoided. And that's the same as it is in winemaking. One side of the road might make Tesco supermarket wine, and the other side the grapes might go to the local chateau. You learn these things. And that cider makers would know that apples in Kingsbury would be worth another £10 a tonne because of where they come from. But it also means I can amuse myself if we have a visitor from Hereford.
Might as well.
Might as well. It normally goes something like this. You can grow beautiful orchards up there, and I admire them hugely because the trees grow straight up in the air. Their red soil the trees seem to like growing there. But the apples is another matter. People in Hereford don't seem to mind. But I normally say something like, you can grow good trees, but it's a pity the apples taste like shit. And they say, well, we'll sell them to Bournemouth, so what the hell. So far, nobody's actually got a cross about it. But we have a pride in our apple crop. We have a pride in what we do, and if you're growing cabbages, you have a pride in your field of cabbages.
That's right.
And the orchard, the Methodists, we are a very Methodist county, used to say that an apple orchard in the autumn was God's description of heaven on earth. And it is a hell of a beautiful sight. And they are not necessarily worshipped, but there's something to worship. And here we are involved in that. The story of apples and orchards is in everybody's DNA if they live in Somerset.
Okay, so I think a little bit of between the different areas. We see it everywhere around the world in each country. And in the end, it's what ends up in the glass that will be the final decider, won't it? Let's talk about the distillation. You have 3 different stills. Each one has a name. Josephine?
Fifi and Isabel.
You're standing in this portrait here that's above us where we're sitting right now in the barrel room. That is Josephine. Josephine, the first one. They're a particular type of still that we don't see really any apple brandy distillers using. So let's talk about this, talk about the name and why you chose that.
They are continuous stills. Looking at it from a distance, you'd say there were 2 columns, but there were 2 towers. They're not effectively column stills in normal understanding, but they are stills which, have always had a role. They produce a very fine apple eau de vie, which is water of life in French, and I have no reason to wish to change to a different sort of still. Some would say we should be distilling on pot stills, some would say other, but they have done us well. Mm-hmm. And eau de vie in that bottle there is a fine eau de vie. There's different ways that people think might be, whether it's a low pressure, doing it by this way or that way. But there are stills of made eau de vie which will be aged for up to 20 years. And we can't find fault with it. And one of the great things actually about our stills is our customers can't understand how they work, which is really brilliant because, I've tried to explain to them and they quite clearly haven't not interested in listening about that. But if you can't understand how they work, our scheme of control for them runs to 20 pages, including the front cover and the back cover. Whereas if we were up in Scotland or whisky trickery, we would have 400 pages of regulation which you would have to abide by.
Right.
So as long as they don't understand what we're up to,
yes,
they understand that cider goes in one end, eau de vie comes out the other end, goes into barrels, and might come out in 20 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
But how it happens, they're happy to leave it as an act of God or mystery.
That's fantastic. Well, cheers to
not understanding.
Lovely.
That's fruity, and it's fruity. Got a lovely,
very fruitful.
There is, quite strong. It gives a very smooth, sort of warm, glowing down to your stomach.
It does, yeah, no heat, lovely.
I was just talking with a brandy maker. He did a London show once, wine show, and he described it as fat. Huh. You could say it's a fat eau de vie, and that's nice.
How do you take that?
I think fat means it has got mouthfeel and it's not one-dimensional. It's got a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. And it is very fruit forward, which is the reason why I understand you picked those stills. And the name of the still is Gazlan?
Gazlan is it's the name of the people that made it.
Yeah.
It was a factory that lived in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
They are coffee stills. They were designed by an Irishman.
Technically, they're coffee stills.
We're not really seeing these stills being used by anyone else to make apple brandy, and obviously you're doing something right here. The one that you just poured here, Matilda, this is the eau de vie, the Somerset apple, and then you also have
Aperitif is the first of our distilled range. It's a blend of an apple brandy and juice of the Kingston Black Apple, and it's married together for a year or two before we bottle it. So it's lovely and light and fruity, but it's got all of that amazing flavour of the Kingston Black with all those floral notes.
Okay, I want to describe a couple things to listeners. We're looking at kind of like what you would use for like a little bit chunkier than an ice cider bottle, but we might see some ice ciders in here. This is the format that they're using here. This is 18% ABV. This is a Kingston Black. It says juice from the legendary Kingston Black apple blended with Somerset cider and brandy. And this beautiful two women, bluish women, really sexy with a sheep on it in the orchard. And on the back, there's a label too. The color, I want to just talk a little bit about the color. So for folks who can't see what we're drinking, in the glass we have this rich amber color and very smooth, very smooth. Oh my goodness, the nose. So fruity on the nose. You're doing a lot with Kingston Black. Kingston Black is a showcase apple here in a way.
Kingston Black loves it here. Apples, they say, they let you know where they want to be. And this farm, Kingston Black apples grow like weeds.
I know everybody listening right now is going, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. It is a coveted apple. We're saying it being single variety, but the fact that you're able to do this at this kind of scale, it's exquisite. It really is. How would you describe the flavors that people would get out of it?
There's the floral nose, that's classic Kingston Black, and then there's a real sort of deep honey, fresh apple.
It's almost like I'm getting a little coffee.
Yeah, I can see that.
A little coffee. It's not really caramely, but it's a little coffee on the palate. Fruity, yeah. Beautiful. I have to admit, I've never had anything like that before. It really is a standout. And this is just one of many products. You have a full range of things here. We're probably not going to be tasting all of them because I'm going to be...
Let's taste this one.
Kingston Black has a cousin, which is Somerset Pomona, which is more of a digestive. If you've got a nice cheese, this is after dinner with a nice cheese.
So this is similar to Kingston Black, but it goes back into barrel. It's a blend of a brandy and a juice, and it goes back into barrel for, on average, about 6 years. And from the barrel, it gets fatter. It will be an Cider Brandy barrel, so it picks up a little bit of the alcohol from that, and it becomes somewhat nuttiness. There's a nuttiness in it.
The wonderful part of the Pomona story is the barrels up to now that have matured this. The empty barrels then go up to Glenfiddich in Scotland and mature some of their products. We've had a 5-year love affair with Glenfiddich, and I suppose it's true to say that most love affairs might last for 5 years, but after that you're pushing your luck a bit. So we've had a long affair with Glenfiddich, and we've left on good terms. But they will have barrels of aged Somerset Pomona in their bond for a long time to come. And they're now moving on to play with something else, but they've always done this. It's been a hugely good connection for us and good fun and a huge kudos. And so we have on the table there some bottles of Glenfiddich, which they call their orchard experiment. And they will move on, and I'm sure they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, I'm sure they do, as do you. And it sounds like it's raining outside. Is that what I'm hearing?
It sounds like it's raining.
Oh my goodness, that's the first rain in a long time here. Okay, I'm picking it up. It's very light, but I was hearing something. I'm like, what's going on?
Did I say to you we were thinking about watering some of our young cherry trees today? And when you're thinking about watering your young cherry trees, it always rains.
You pulled it in. Now, you call this Pomona. You're not calling it Pommeau.
No.
Can I ask you what your thoughts are on people using the name Pommeau? It's a trademark for the French cider makers. But it's easy to call things Pommeau. We're seeing people doing that, but I don't see really anyone in the UK using Pommeau on their bottles or on their labels.
No one's really doing it in the UK until this last year when they've all started thinking about it, and that is mostly because they're being sold the idea by a contract distiller, and it's a great product to make. We don't call it Pommeau because we're not French, and we want to make something that is different. Our Pomona is similar to Pommeau, but it is not made in exactly the same way. The profile is quite different because of the apples. We use quite a sharp apple to get there. And I think it would be a mistake for people in the UK to make something and try and ape the French. Just in the same way we would never want to call our brandy Calvados because we're Somerset. We wouldn't want to call our other products with French names.
What I love about the experience here is that you are embracing your own region. You're not trying to copy anyone else. You have your own brand, you have your own model, and that's exactly...
In the orchard we took you to see,
Yes.
about 100 yards from the last tree you would have seen, there's a Roman villa. And about 10 years ago they dug it up and there was a Roman pavement there with dolphins flying, swimming around. They covered it back up with earth. So we have Roman remains very close to the bottom of the orchard. So using the Roman god of fruit, who seemed to be in keeping.
I think it is a mistake in the food and drink industry. You have to be able to take pride in your origins and stand by those. And that is, if you're going to do something unique, you stand up and don't pretend to be something else.
Thank you for being a role model for others in that way. Going back to the distillation, what is your timeline there between the cider and then distilling? In Normandy, they're looking at maybe like 3 weeks or something like that for distillation. What are you looking at?
We make our cider and that takes us till Christmas. And then we wait patiently until it's all dry. And then we tend to distill before the malolactic fermentation. So we will tend to distill from February and finish before May. We may start earlier if the cider's dry. It depends. It might have a long fermentation if we have a very cold winter. It's had a much faster fermentation in the last few years because we've had such warm winters. We let the cider do its thing naturally and then we'll ferment whenever it's ready.
The blending for the Somerset profile, for somebody who is coming here the first time or seeking out your product that you're trying to convey in the Somerset Cider and Brandy brand that they could expect?
It's the orchards. Everything goes back to the orchards. So if you're tasting that 20-year-old, which was actually harvested in the 1990s, you've got to be able to taste the apples and orchards. And that goes through all of our range. If you start being overpowered by something else, we haven't done our job right, because everything that we do here is trying to make those orchards stand out. We do a core range, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old, and they've got very different profiles, and we blend to those profiles. So we blend between barrels, between years, and we know what we're looking for the different profiles. So you're tasting a rather huge glass of 20-year-old there.
I'm licking
You've still got the apples, I hope.
my tongue's going around my mouth and I'm just like wanting to coat it because...
Shall I ask you a question then?
Yes.
Is the wait of 20 years worthwhile?
Yes.
I would say so.
I would say 100%.
We're going to do more of that in due course,
But this is spectacular, and you have that fruit forward that often can get lost. It's very smooth, lovely finish. I love the oak overtures in here. Really nice. And I'm a fan of the oak, so maybe I'm more particular than others, but I highly recommend for listeners to should be on your bucket list for everyone. The color here, when something's being aged a bit, where you have the eau de vie, it looks like water, and then as it's in the barrel, it imparts the colors.
one that the king ended up with Christmas.
He did, okay, well, probably put it underneath his pillow too that night, and nobody else would drink it, right?
Queen Camilla must be a foodie, because Tom Parker Bowles is a foodie, and he must have got it from somewhere. She would have told the king what it was about. The local RAF gets invited to Sandringham estate party, Christmas estate party, and presumably they all have to put a bottle under a tree or something. And the local RAF that control the airport, which he flies in and out of, would have left him the bottle that he would have got hold of.
Well, it should be coveted by the king and anyone else. I mean, you don't have to be a king to enjoy this. This is exquisite. You know what I like? It has a softness to it, but a complexity. It's kind of a duality that doesn't make sense, but it's right there. And it's so well balanced. Drink right here.
In the world of Calvados, our best friend there is called Christian Drouin, and he's written a book about Calvados, which has been published in America. And he writes on page 3, he writes the history of Calvados, and he includes about us as well. And then he says in one paragraph how Matilda had given him a bottle of 20 years old, and he thought he ought to taste it to see if it's any good. And he comes back with in the book saying it's as good as any AOC Calvados.
It is. I would highly agree with that. Yeah.
Well, we're just very honoured that he would say such a thing, and I think it shows a good degree of charity that he does say such a thing.
It really is. I mean, of different brandies that I've tasted, apple brandies, you have that signature for your spot here, your special spot in Ciderville right here, and yet it can go up against the greatest Calvados out there. That's tremendous. Really, tip of the glass.
Our 10 years old is our main seller.
Oh, interesting.
And it's very good. But
what do you typically drink?
I would drink the 20 years old, but we are now very short of it. But I appreciate the 10 years old. But the 20-year-old has a whole another layer to it. It is undoubtedly.
Yeah, 20 years, that's 2005.
But the apple orchards have gone a long way to look after us. So we can do a few things to look after them. And the story of cider leads on to the story of Cider Brandy. And if I would have a party of, in fact, I think on the 20th of September I end up with about 30 or 40 cider makers, I will most likely tell them somewhere along the line that this is what cider makers do when they grow up. And they might all walk off and might not think that's funny, but at the same time they might do.
They might do that, yeah.
But we have something that says, one cider maker, he said, I've been making cider all my life. Inches of Devon, very important cider makers. He used to be a judge at a Devon County show. And he said he'd been a cider maker all his life. And this changed, tasting cider brandy changed his view of what he'd been doing all his life. And he was basically amazed. And if we can endeavour a little bit of pride in the cider world, that's all we can hope for.
Here we're pretty committed to the traditional orchard, so when Julian's planting an orchard now, he's not planting it for my generation, he's planting it for 2 generations down the line, because the spirit we make out of those orchards is not going to be sold until the 2050s. So it's
so exciting.
You have to believe in the romance of it, because it's a business where you're thinking so far in advance.
Right.
I'm just at the beginning and I'm already planning for the next generation.
Yeah.
And that's not the cleverest business model, but certainly.
It's the way of the cider maker. You know, it really is, and you're embracing it. I had the question, what's your 100-year plan? And I think we heard a little bit of that, right?
A 100-year plan, well, let's hope that people still drink in 100 years. But our 100-year plan would be that these orchards around here, that we've managed to replant more orchards, we've expanded this little magical environment, because these orchards are priority habitats, which means they're hugely biodiverse, that we've managed to expand those, replant. One of our family or one of someone else's family that's working here is still involved, still pushing it forward, that we're using our own oak trees that we've planted in this generation, and that someone's still doing it, but most importantly, that we're not a big industrial factory. We never want to be there. And when I started, and there was a changing of the guard, there was a temptation to think about it differently. And for one reason or another, we went through the process of thinking about where we want to be. And none of this generation ever want to have a cider factory. It's got to be a cider farm. And without it being a cider farm, the romance is lost. So it's good. We have humble aspirations, long-term ones, but humble ones.
Sitting in this room does not feel humble at all. I'm in absolute awe. This is very forward.
What worries me is I know what is here now, and it represents so much. Maybe by making a decision to go this way, that seemed really, given the risks that we now know exist, given everything that we now know, to decide to go down this way was really bonkers. But bonkers seems to work sometimes. The question is, did seeing that orchard, was it worth driving that way to see the orchard?
100%. Oh, he has a certain mischievousness about him that one can only adore. What a time with both Matilda Temperly and her father, Julian, at the Somerset Cider and Brandy Company. 100% worth every single moment. And I hope this has encouraged you to both visit that location and perhaps to come with me when we return there in April of 2026 on the upcoming Totally Cider Tour to the UK. Send an email today to info@ciderchat and get your name on the wait list for that tour to the UK and to the fall tour to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Bitter sharp, strange apples, juicy ripe. Bop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop, bop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop. Who wants a Tannenbaum?
I want a Tannenbaum.
Who wants to pull them down?
I'm gonna pull them down. Hey, 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 apples, bittersweet,
strange apples,
hanging high.
got them strange apples.
Forget the pie.
Strange apples, squeeze them tight. Got them strange apples. Strange apples. Strange apples. Make them pop. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-dum-doo-dee-da. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-dum-doo-dee-da.
Who wants a Tannenbaum?
I want a Tannenbaum.
Who wants to pull them down?
I'm gonna pull them down. Hey, 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 apples.
Come and see. Plenty strange apples for you and me. Strange apples. Strange apples. Strange apples.
Make them pop. Pop, pop, pop.
Ba-da-doo-doo-da.
Pop, pop, pop. Ba-da-doo-dee-da. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-da-doo-dee-da. Pop, pop, pop. Pop, 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 pop.